Hello kids! We are now on quarter 3, week 7. Analyzing a story in terms of its elements. In this lesson, kids, you are going to analyze a story in terms of its elements. So I would like to congratulate everybody because this is the last lesson for quarter 3 in English. Now let's go! Before we proceed to our main lesson, let's review. Can you tell me what have you learned from our previous lesson? Did I hear it right? Yes, that is tone. Last lesson we talked about the tone. Next, it's the mood of the writer. Good job. How about the third one? It's the purpose of the writer now. Can you tell me what are the 3 purposes in writing a story? Yes, that is to persuade. Next. Oh, well done. It's to inform. Very good. And the last one? Of course, to entertain. Good job, kids. Now I am sure that you are ready for our next lesson. Yay! So let's go. Let's check what you know about the lesson. So look here, kids. When you read a story, you capture the emotions of the characters from what they say, do, or how they do things. So here are some excerpts from a story and find out what the character feels in each one by writing the letter of the correct answer on a separate sheet of paper. Let's have question number 1. Jason sat alone on a rock and looked out to the sea. His dream to win the foot race was now dead. Marcus had just told him he could not enter the contest. Jason felt blank. Okay, so for today, we are going to read a story about the mother bird's love. Are you ready? Let's go! Okay, so let's check if you have understood the story. Here is question number one. Who is the main character in the story? Very good. Number two, where did Mother Bird left the little birds to look for food? Remember kids, you have to answer in complete sentences. That's great job. Now let's go to number three. Why did the little birds fell on the pile of grasses? That's awesome! Okay, very good kids. Now let's go to this part. So Nathan is asking you a question. Do you enjoy reading stories? What is your favorite story so far? So you can share your favorite stories to your mom, to your dad, to your friends, and anybody in the house. Now here is Mia. Mia says, great stories have exciting twists, relatable character, lively descriptions, and lasting effects. But behind your favorite story is a framework made up of essential elements of storytelling. And here is Timmy. The more you get familiar with the kinds of elements, the better you will understand and critically analyze stories. Let's begin! So let's begin, kids. Let's talk about stories. says here, a story is an account of imaginary or real people and events told for entertainment. It can be a piece of prose fiction that typically can be read in one sitting. The events in the story can be real or imaginary, covering both fiction and non-fiction. So class, when we say imaginary, of course you're going to use your imagination. While real people, of course you know that well. So the first kind is we have there fiction stories. Can you say that? Fiction stories. Great. Fiction stories are based on imaginary events. You have to remember that, kids. We call it fiction because it is based on imaginary events. Now, here are the examples of fiction stories. The first one is fairy tales. Of course, I'm sure you know that well. Examples of fairy tales are your Cinderella story, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Rapunzel. Yes, they are all fairy tales. Next, folklore. Can you say folklore? One example of this is The Monkey and the Turtle. Of course, this falls still under fiction because the characters of the story are also imaginary. Could you imagine in real life a turtle planting a banana? Of course, that is imaginary. Next is mythology. Mythology talks about, or the characters are gods and goddesses. We have there the stories of Maria Makiling. Yes, that's an example. It's also the story of Ibong Adarna, if you are familiar with that. That is also mythology. Next, legends. This is one of the most familiar fiction stories for kids like you. One is Ang Alamat ng Pinya. We also have Ang Alamat ng Bayabas, Ang Alamat ng Kasoy, and a lot more. Epic. This is different from these fiction stories because this epic is in the form of a poem. An example of that is Biag ni Lamang. That is an epic. So you can make a research on that in the internet. And the last one is fantasy. Of course, you know that well. It's the story of Harry Potter series. We have the Lord of the Rings and a lot more. Those are fantasy stories. Alright, now let's move to the next one. The second one is, of course, non-fiction stories. Okay, non-fiction stories can cover real-life events or experiences. Right, there you go. Example, news and current events. Of course, the people in the news and current events are real, and even the events are also real. A writer or a news reporter cannot write imaginary things, imaginary people. That is against the law. Next is biographies. And we also have autobiographies. So what are the differences of these biographies and autobiographies? Biographies are life stories written by other people about a certain person. Okay? So, for example, we are reading the life story of Juan. Okay? Berto wrote the life story of Juan. That is an example of a biography. When we say autobiography, it is the person himself. Okay, who wrote this his life story? So in our example before, it's Juan. Okay, so Juan wrote his own story, his own life story. So that is an example of an autobiography. We also have the cultural history. Example, how about the story of how Lapu-Lapu fought Magellan? That is recorded in our history. So that is non-fiction story. The last one is survivor stories. Okay. Now we're now going to talk about the elements of a story. So the first one is characters, or the characters of the story. These are the people or animals in the story. It tells how the characters in the story are described. Now we have two kinds of characters, class, and you have to remember this. The first one is the protagonist, which is the main character of the story, while the antagonist is the person in conflict with the main story or with the main character. So, the protagonist in Tagalog is what we call the bida in the story, and the antagonist is what we call the kontrabida in the story. So, now you know, kids. You know what to call them now. Next, we have the setting. Of course, this is already familiar to you. The setting talks about the place and time that the events in the story happen. Now, going back to our story a while ago, let's talk about the characters. Who are the characters in the story? It's the mother bird and the baby birds. Very good. Alright, now, how about the setting? What is the setting of the story? Alright, on a tree, in the nest, or even in the forest, that can be. Good job. Now let's go to number 3. We have the plot. The plot makes up the events that happened in the story, or what we call the sequence of events. So that is how the story started until how the story ended. Did you get it? Okay. Now, and under plot, the following. The plot includes, first, the conflict. The conflict tells who the main character is and what he or she wants. So in our story, what is the conflict? The mother wants to, yes, look for food. Okay, next, how about the problem? The problem tells how the main character tries to get what he or she wants. So in our story again, the problem was, how did she try to get what she wants? She left her babies on the nest. Alright, and she tried to look for food. Okay, and reaction. The reaction presents the actions made by the characters to solve the problem. Alright, so what was the problem? The wind came by, right? And yes. So where did the birds go? The little ones go on the grass, on the pile of grass. So, what did the mother bird do? She tried to look for her young ones. Yes, alright. And resolution. It is the point of the story where the character must face the outcome, satisfactory or unsatisfactory, of the adventure. And the last one is the ending. It gives the solution to the problem. Okay, so there you go. Let's say it again, class. Please read with teacher. Let's say conflict, problem, reaction, resolution, ending. All right, that's a good one. Now let's do this activity. So here is what you are going to do. Analyze the given statements. Write a check mark if the statement is true or a cross mark if the statement is false. Are you ready? All right, let's do it, kids. Number one, there are only two elements that can be found in a story. What is your answer? Oh, that's a good job. The answer is X. Okay. Number two, protagonist is the person in conflict with the main character. The answer is very good. Because the person in conflict is what we call the antagonist. Okay, good job. Now let's go to number three. The problem tells how the main character tries to get what he or she wants. Yes, that's good job. It's a check mark. Number four. Plot usually begins with a problem and ends in the story's resolution. Very good. It's a check mark. And now let's go to number five. Fairy tales, epic, and fantasy are examples of non-fiction stories. Is it a check or X? All right, that is very good, kids. Good job. All right, now let's move to the next activity. Here we go. Now this time you're going to write FS if it is a fictional story and NFS if it is a non-fictional story. Let's go. Number one, current event. The answer is NFS. Very good. Number two, fairy tales. That's great job. It's FS. Number three, survivor stories. Very good. NFS, non-fiction. How about number four? Legends. All right. Good job. Fiction FS. And number five, news. And five, four, three, two, one. The answer is, of course, NFS, non-fiction story. Okay, very good, kids. You did a great job. Yay! Okay, now let's go to the next part. So, this is Nathan again, and he is asking you to do something. He says, Help me fill in the blanks with the correct term to complete the thought about our lesson today. Here we go! Now look at that, class. A blank is an account of imaginary or real people and events told for entertainment. Wow, that's great job. It's a story. Okay. How about number 2? Blank are based on imaginary events. Of course, we call that fiction stories. So, fiction stories are based on imaginary events, while blank can cover real life events or experience. Okay, very good. It's non-fiction stories. So let's read the whole sentence now. Fiction stories are based on imaginary events, while non-fiction stories can cover real life event or experience. Now let's go to number 3. Blank are the people or animals in the story. Of course, that's correct. We call them characters. So let's read the complete sentence now. Characters are the people or animals in the story. Very good. Number 4. Blank talks about the place and the time that the events in the story happened. Great! It is the setting. Setting talks about the place and the time that the events in the story happened. And the last one, blank makes up the events that happened in the story. All right, we call that plot. Okay, so the plot makes up the events that happened in the story. Wow, great job, kids. You did well today. Very good. Now let's go to the next slide. So this is what you're going to do for your assessment. Read the story, The Beauty of Nature, and analyze the elements of the story by filling up the outline. So this is what you're going to fill out, class. You're going to fill out the title, the setting, the characters, and of course the plot. So remember, you have to identify the conflict, problem, reaction, resolution, and ending of the story. There you go. I hope you had a great time with me, and I hope you learned something today. Stay safe, kids, and stay safe, everyone. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.